The cold was a physical presence in the old high school bus, a damp chill that seeped through the canvas of my uniform and settled deep in my bones. It was 5:45 on a Saturday morning in late November, and the world outside the fogged windows was a study in shades of gray. Anya sat across from me, her posture mirroring mine, back straight, hands on her knees, gaze fixed on some invisible point in the middle distance. We didn't speak. The only sounds were the rumble of the engine and the rhythmic squeak of the windshield wipers battling a freezing drizzle. Sergeant Major Chen drove in silence, a monolithic figure encased in a green fleece. He hadn't offered an explanation when he'd called us the night before, only a time and a location. The bus loop, 5:30, we knew better than to ask. This was the new normal, the part of the application process that wasn't on any checklist or study guide. This was where theory met the mud. He pulled the bus to a jerky halt in a deserted county park, the kind with picnic tables and a rusting swing set that looked skeletal in the pre-dawn gloom. "Disembark," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. We stood in a loose line before him, our breath pluming in the air. The rain had softened to a mist that clung to every surface, including our faces. "You can recite the chain of command. You can list the principles of war. You can probably calculate the trajectory of a mortar round in your sleep," Chen began, his eyes moving from Anya to me and back again. "But leadership isn't a multiple-choice question. It's a problem that presents itself when you're tired, when you're cold, and when the solution isn't in the manual. Your task is simple. On the other side of that creek," he gestured to a swollen, brown ribbon of water behind him, "is a supply cache. You need to retrieve it and bring it back to this point. You have the materials you find here. You have 30 minutes. The clock starts now." He turned and walked back to the bus, settling into the driver's seat with a thermos of coffee. He didn't look back. Anya and I looked at the materials. It was a pile of junk, 2 lengths of frayed rope, 3 empty 5-gallon buckets, a roll of duct tape, and a few scattered 2x4s of dubious integrity. The creek was about 20 feet across, moving fast with the recent rains. "Right," Anya said, her competitive edge sharpening her tone. "We lash the boards together, make a bridge." "The current will sweep that away in seconds," I countered, my mind already racing through variables. Water speed, weight distribution, tensile strength of the rope. The buckets, we use them as floats, a raft. "A raft with what frame? Those boards are too short." She was right. We stood for a precious minute, our thoughts almost audible in the tense space between us. The pressure was a tight coil in my chest. I could feel Croft's skeptical gaze in my mind, his voice whispering about long odds and practical choices. I shut it down, channeling the doubt into a surge of focus. "We don't cross the water," I said, the idea forming fully. "We go over it, that oak tree." I pointed to a large limb stretching over the creek from our side. "We tie the rope to it, we use the buckets as counterweights or pulleys, and we swing across." Anya's eyes widened, then narrowed as she assessed the plan. "The rope might not hold, the branch might be rot." "It's the only plan that doesn't end with us hypothermic. You have a better one." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "No, let's do it. You're taller, you get the rope over the branch." The next 20 minutes were a blur of frantic, muddy effort. My fingers, numb with cold, fumbled with the knots. Anya, lighter and more agile, scrambled up my back to secure the rope higher. We used the duct tape to create handholds to reinforce the weakest parts of the rope. We argued about physics, about the best angle of approach, our voices sharp but never personal. This was the dance we'd perfected over the last 3 months, a rivalry that honed rather than hurt. I went first, the rope burning through my gloves as I launched myself over the churning water. For a terrifying second, I swung out over the center of the creek, the world a dizzying whirl of brown and gray, before my boots hit the soft earth on the far bank. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through me. Anya followed, her swing more controlled, her landing sure. The cache was just a weighted duffel bag. Getting it back was harder. We rigged a crude pulley with the second bucket, hauling the heavy bag across while we swung back one at a time, our muscles screaming. We dragged the bag to the finish point just as Chen stepped out of the bus. He checked his watch. 28 minutes, 47 seconds. He walked over to the duffel, unzipped it, and pulled out 2 bricks. That was all that was inside. He looked at us, our uniforms caked in mud, our faces streaked with sweat and rain, our chests heaving. Adequate, he said. Then he tossed each of us a clean towel from the bus. It was the highest praise we would ever get from him, and it felt better than any trophy. The grind was a machine I had built for myself, and I was both the operator and the fuel. Every minute was accounted for, a block of color on the elaborate spreadsheet taped to my bedroom wall. Blue for academics, red for wrestling practice, green for JROTC, yellow for community service at the veterans' home, and a stark, unwavering black for my daily CFA training. Pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, the mile run. The social events that had once dotted the calendar. The movie nights, the aimless drives, the parties in someone's dusty basement, had vanished, replaced by the relentless pursuit of a single point on a future map. My old friends didn't get it. "Come on, Elias, just for an hour," Mark had pleaded outside the library one evening, his breath smelling faintly of the beer he'd doubtless been drinking. "You've turned into a ghost." I looked at him, at his easy smile and his carefree posture, and felt a chasm open between us that was as wide as the creek in the park. He lived in the present. I was mortgaging it for a future he couldn't comprehend. The only person from that old life who still had a key to the machine was Sophia. She'd slip into my room late at night, long after I'd finished my homework, and was drilling flashcards for the candidate fitness assessment, a silent apparition in paint-splattered pajamas. She wouldn't speak, just would place a mug of hot chocolate on my desk and curl up in my worn-out armchair, sketching in the muted glow of my desk lamp. Her presence was a quiet anchor in the storm of my own making. It was on one of those nights, deep into a frigid January, that the machine finally spluttered. I was staring at a practice test for the medical exam, a diagram of the human eye blurring before me. My right shoulder, aggravated from a particularly brutal wrestling takedown drill, throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. A slow panic was beginning to uncoil in my gut, the kind no amount of preparation could assuage. The fear of a random physical flaw, a genetic lottery ticket I hadn't known I'd entered, derailing everything. Sophia looked up from her sketchbook. "You're grinding your teeth again." I leaned back, the chair groaning in protest. "It's all just noise. Sometimes I can't hear my own thoughts over the schedule." "What are they saying, your thoughts?" I looked at her clear, perceptive eyes that missed nothing. She was the one person I couldn't lie to. "They're saying I'm not good enough. That Croft is right. That I'm a kid from a town nobody's heard of, pretending I can play soldier with the sons of generals. That I'm going to get to that interview, and my mind will just go blank." "And what does the other part of you say? The part that made you swing across a creek on a rope?" "It says to shut up and do another set of pull-ups." She smiled, a small, sad thing. "You know Mom and Dad are just proud of you, right? Whatever happens, they don't say it enough, but they are, I am." That was the fracture, not in my resolve, but in the dam I'd built to hold back the fear. "I know," I said, my voice rough. "That's what makes it worse. Letting them down. Letting Chen down after all the time he's invested. Letting down everyone who ever thought for a second that I could actually do this." I put my head in my hands, the pressure behind my eyes finally building to a breaking point. "Sometimes I wish I wanted something easier." She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't tell me I would succeed. Instead, she got up, crossed the room, and put her hand on my sore shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm and gentle. "You don't, though," she said softly. "That's the thing, Elias, you really don't." The nomination interview was held on a bright, cold Tuesday in the Federal Building downtown. The air inside was dry and smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and quiet anxiety. Anya and I sat in stiff wooden chairs outside the conference room, both of us in our best JROTC dress uniforms. The silver of our insignia gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. We didn't speak. We had spent the previous evening together, a final, intense study session at my kitchen table, drilling each other on current events, the Constitution, and the 5-paragraph operations order. Now, the time for collaboration was over. "Anya Petrov." A clerk opened the door. She stood, gave me a single, sharp nod, a gesture that contained a universe of shared suffering and unwavering respect, and disappeared inside. The door clicked shut, and I was alone with the hum of the lights and the echo of Croft's voice in my head. "It's a noble goal, Elias, but you have to be realistic. The nomination process is intensely competitive. They look for a certain pedigree." I closed my eyes, breathing slowly, deliberately. I didn't try to silence the voice anymore. I let it come, and I let it fuel the fire. I thought of the muddy creek, of Sophia's hand on my shoulder, of Chen's silent approval. I assembled the pressure, the doubt, the fatigue, and channeled it all into a single, sharp point of purpose. 20 minutes later, Anya emerged. Her face was a calm mask, but a faint flush high on her cheekbones and a bright, fierce light in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She had been brilliant. Elias Vance. I walked into a room that felt both vast and suffocatingly small. A long mahogany table was lined with 5 serious-faced adults, including Congresswoman Evans herself. The flags of the nation and the state stood stiffly in the corners. Martin Croft sat at the far end of the panel, and he didn't meet my eye, instead studying a file in front of him, my file. The questions began, formal and expected. Why the military? Why West Point? What does leadership mean to you? My answers were clean, rehearsed, delivered with a confidence I forced into my posture and my voice. Then Congresswoman Evans leaned forward, her hands clasped. Mr. Vance, your academic and physical records are solid, but this district produces many solid students. Convince me, why you, not the academy, but you? This was the moment. Croft's skepticism was a tangible force in the room. I could feel him waiting for the stutter, the stumble, the confirmation of his pragmatic worldview. I looked directly at her, and for the first time I let the polished veneer crack just a little to show the engine underneath. "Ma'am, I can't speak to pedigree," I began, and I saw Croft flinch almost imperceptibly. "I can only speak to preparation. For the last 2 years, I have approached this goal not as a dream, but as a mission. Every test, every drill, every hour of community service has been a deliberate step toward being ready for the responsibility you're considering and trusting to someone. I've learned that discipline isn't about punishment, it's about love. Love for the people you'll lead, love for the country you'll serve. I don't have a family legacy at the academy. What I have is a relentless need to earn one, starting right here, right now. I'm not the most gifted candidate in this room today. But I can promise you with absolute certainty that I will be the most prepared." The room was silent. I held her gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had taken Croft's doubt and forged it into my answer. I had shown them the grind. A few more perfunctory questions, and it was over. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. We'll be in touch." I walked out, my body thrumming with spent energy. Anya was gone. The hallway was empty. I stood there for a long moment, the echo of my own words hanging in the air. I had done it. I had left everything I had in that room. There was no euphoria, only a deep, resonant stillness, the quiet after a storm. I was exhausted to my very core, but the blurry uncertainty of months had been sharpened into a single, clean edge. Whatever happened now, I knew I had not been found wanting in the moment of trial. The machine had held. I had held. The rain had finally stopped, but the air in March felt heavier than any downpour. It was a wet, clinging cold that seeped through my jacket as I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots with a sound like grinding teeth. The mailbox, a rust-speckled blue, stood as the final arbiter of 2 years of my life. My hand was steady as I opened it, steadier than I expected. Inside were the usual things: a flyer for gutter cleaning, a credit card offer for my parents, and 3 envelopes, one thick from State University, another from the engineering school. The third was thin, business-sized, with a familiar eagle and shield crest in the upper corner. My heart didn't hammer. It just stopped. I carried them inside, the thin one burning a hole against the other 2. In my room, I placed them on the desk in a line. State first. I opened it. "Congratulations," I read the words, felt nothing. "Engineering school next." Another congratulations, this one with a mention of a merit scholarship. A lifeline thrown from a ship I never intended to board. I set them aside. My fingers were cold. I picked up the thin envelope. The paper was a heavier stock. I slid my thumb under the flap, the tear sounding obscenely loud in the silent room. I pulled out a single sheet. "Dear Candidate Vance." The world didn't shatter. It just went silent and very, very still. The words "waiting list" didn't blur. They sat there, black and final, in the middle of the paragraph. They explained the process, the possibility of an offer if a primary nominee declined. It was a maybe, a conditional, hypothetical maybe. After 2 years of definitive push-ups, definitive test scores, definitive miles run, I had been given a maybe. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it neatly along its original creases, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. I closed the drawer. I looked at my hands. They were clean. There was no mud from the creek, no rope burned from the exercise with Chen. They were just hands. The next few days were a study in silence. I went to school. I answered questions from teachers with monosyllables. I saw Anya in the hall once, her face lit with a suppressed, radiant energy she couldn't contain. She had her answer. I knew it before she said a word. She saw me, started to move toward me, her mouth opening, but I turned and walked the other way, down the crowded hall, the noise washing over me like I was behind glass. Sophia found me in the garage, reorganizing my toolbox for the third time. I was sorting screws by length and gauge, a pointless, meticulous task. She didn't ask. She sat on the old stool by the workbench, the one with the wobbly leg, and watched my hands. "You're making a system," she said finally, her voice soft. "It needs a system," I said, not looking up. It was inefficient. "You got the letter." "I did." She waited. I lined up a row of quarter-inch machine screws, their heads gleaming in the bare bulb's light. "And," she prompted. "Waiting list." She inhaled sharply, a tiny, pained sound. Then she was just there, her hand on my forearm, stopping my compulsive sorting. "Elia's." "It's a no, Soph. It's a polite no." Croft was right. Saying it out loud made it real, a cold stone settling in my gut. The relentless preparation, the obsessive detail, it had got me to the edge but not over. I was a backup plan, an alternate. "That man is never right," she said, her voice fierce. "He's just loud." I shook my head, pulling my arm away to resume sorting. "He's realistic, that's what he always says, and reality is a waiting list. Anya got it. She's the primary, I'm the contingency." The bitterness in my own voice surprised me. I wasn't angry at Anya. I was angry at the universe's confirmation of a rule I'd refused to believe. That effort didn't always equal achievement. That sometimes you just didn't measure up. I avoided the JROTC armory. I skipped the morning workouts. I didn't check my email. I let the state school acceptance deadlines loom, unacknowledged. I was adrift in a plan I had never seriously considered, and the uncertainty was a vacuum. He found me 2 days later, after final period. I was the last one leaving the physics lab, methodically wiping down my station. Sergeant Major Chen was standing in the hallway just outside the door, his posture ramrod straight, his hands clasped behind his back. He wasn't in uniform, just pressed khakis and a windbreaker, but he still looked like he was inspecting troops. "Vance," he said, his voice was neutral. "Sergeant Major." I kept my eyes on the clean lab table. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. I followed him through the empty halls, our footsteps echoing. He didn't speak. He led me not to his office, but to the JROTC armory. The large, cavernous room was empty, the ranks of rubber M16s on their racks, the smell of floor wax and old wool hanging in the air. The flag stood still in the windless room. He walked to the center of the polished floor and turned to face me. "You've been avoiding this place," he said. "Yes." "Why?" I saw no tactical benefit in continued attendance. A flicker in his eyes, not quite amusement. Tactical benefit, is that what this was? A tactical operation? It was a mission. The mission failed. "Did it?" He crossed his arms. "You received a waiting list designation." "It's a no." "It is not a no. It is a holding position, a strategic reserve." I felt a hot flare of something, frustration, despair break through the numb shell. Strategic reserve? That's a nice way to put it. It means I wasn't good enough. Not as good as Petrov. Not good enough for the primary slot. All of it, the PT, the essays, the creek, the boards, and the rope, my voice tightened. I looked away at the perfect alignment of the rifles. It wasn't enough. For a long moment, he was silent. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Look at me, Vance." I did. His face was stern, etched with lines of a lifetime of similar conversations, but his eyes were clear and direct. "You think this is about being good enough? You think the world is a simple meritocracy where the highest score wins the prize?" He took a step closer. "Petrov earned her nomination. She is an exceptional candidate. You are an exceptional candidate. The committee had to choose one primary. They chose. That is the reality. Your reality right now is that you are on the waiting list. That is your battlefield. What is your next move?" I had no answer. My plan ended at the appointment letter. The waiting list was a blank space, a purgatory. I don't know. Wait, I guess. You guess, his voice was flat. You have state school acceptances. Good ones. Do you intend to take them? I have to. It's the prudent thing. The word tasted like Croft. Prudent? Chen repeated the word as if it were a foreign object. Prudent is for people who have no other objective. You had an objective. Has it changed? The objective is no longer achievable. Zit? He thundered, his voice suddenly filling the empty armory, bouncing off the trophy cases. The objective was West Point. The objective is still West Point. The parameters have changed. Your timeline is extended. Your required actions have changed. A soldier whose primary avenue of advance is blocked does not lie down in the road. He finds another route, he flanks, he regroups, he persists. He does not declare the mission a failure because the first plan didn't survive contact with the enemy. The enemy here is your own doubt, and right now, Private, it is kicking your ass. I stood there, stunned into silence. He never raised his voice to me before. He lowered his volume, but the intensity remained. You prepared for a yes. Did you prepare for a maybe? A true soldier, a true leader prepares for every contingency. Plan B is not surrender. Plan B is a different angle of attack. Your mission is still active. Your duty is to maintain readiness. You will accept your state school slot. You will excel there. You will continue physical training. You will be ready. If that waiting list converts, you will be ready to step off. If it does not, you will have a year of exemplary college work and you will reapply. You have not been defeated. You have been given a different set of orders. The question is whether you have the discipline to follow them when they are not the orders you wanted. He stared at me, waiting. The words were a gut punch, but they were also a rope. A different route, a flanking maneuver. It wasn't hope, not quite. It was a reframing of the objective, a new set of variables to master. The waiting list, the chance is minuscule, I said, my voice hoarse. It is non-zero, he countered. And your job is to be ready for that non-zero chance, or to be ready for the next application cycle. Is that understood? I looked at him, at the unyielding certainty in his face. He wasn't offering sympathy. He was offering a duty, a continuation of the mission. It was the only kind of support that could possibly reach me. I straightened my shoulders. Understood, Sergeant Major. Good, now get out of my armory. I have paperwork. I turned to leave. Vance. I stopped. The work you did was not wasted. It made you. That doesn't go away with a piece of paper. Remember that. I gave a sharp nod and left. The world outside was still the same, but my place in it had shifted. I was not a failure. I was a soldier in a holding pattern. My new task was readiness. It was a task I could understand. The email from Mr. Croft's secretary arrived the next morning. Please see Mr. Croft during your free period. I knew what it was. The congratulations on my state schools. The I told you so, made gentle and paternal. I walked into his office at the appointed time. It was the same as ever. The overly warm air, the fake plant, the framed inspirational posters about reaching for the stars that now seemed like a cruel joke. Croft looked up from his computer, a bland, professional smile on his face. Elias, come in, sit down. Shut the door, please. I did. I sat in the same chair I'd sat in 2 years ago, when he'd first told me to be realistic. I've been reviewing the college acceptance data, he began, steepling his fingers. I see you've gotten some excellent options. The state university and the engineering school with a scholarship. That's fantastic news. Exactly the kind of solid, achievable future we talked about. He beamed at me, a man vindicated by the universe's sensible workings. Thank you, sir, I said, my voice level. I knew you had the drive, he continued, leaning back. You just needed to channel it in the right direction, toward something tangible. This is a real victory, Elias. You should be proud. It proves that listening to a little prudent advice can set a young man on the right path. He paused, expecting my gratitude, my relief. I looked at him. I saw the weary, pragmatic man who believed he was saving kids from heartbreak. I thought of the creek, the cold, the impossible puzzle of boards and rope. I thought of Chen's voice in the empty armory. I thought of the thin envelope in my desk drawer. I also heard from West Point, I said. His expression faltered, just for a second. The smile became fixed. Oh. I'm on the waiting list. Flicker of something surprise, then a swift recalculation passed over his face. The smile softened into something patronizing, sympathetic. Ah, well, that's an honor in itself, of course. But you know the statistics on those waitlist offers. It's a long shot, a very long shot. You have these wonderful, concrete offers right here. He gestured as if the state schools were physically present in the room. The smart move, the safe move, is to secure your future. Put down that deposit. Move forward. He was doing it again. Pruning the dream because it was messy, because it was uncertain. I didn't feel angry. I felt a cold, clear certainty. Chen had given me my orders. This was part of the battlefield. "Mr. Croft," I said, and my voice was quiet, but it filled the small, warm room. "You once told me my dream was a long shot. You advised me to be realistic. And look where realism has gotten you," he said, spreading his hands. "Two fantastic acceptances." "Let me tell you what realism has been for me," I said, and I began to talk. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the relentless, factual detail of an after-action report. Realism was a 4.0 GPA while working 20 hours a week at the hardware store. Realism was a 96 on the ASVAB. Realism was running a 6-minute mile, then a 5:45, then a 5:30. Realism was studying constitutional law for the nomination board on my lunch breaks. Realism was learning to lead a color guard, to teach freshmen how to march, to inventory every single piece of equipment in the armory twice. Realism was standing in a freezing creek in February, figuring out how to build a bridge with a rival because an old soldier told us to. I leaned forward slightly. Realism was the 237 days of preparation I logged. The waiting list is a fact. It is my current reality. My plan is to accept my state school slot. I will maintain a physical fitness regimen that meets West Point standards. I will achieve a 4.0 my first semester. I will be ready if the waiting list converts. If it does not, I will reapply next year from a position of even greater strength. That is my realistic plan. I stopped. The office was utterly silent. The hum of his computer seemed loud. Croft was staring at me. The paternal, knowing mask had slipped completely. He wasn't looking at a naive kid anymore. He was looking at a young man who had dissected his own dream, understood its component parts, its failure points, and was methodically, relentlessly rebuilding the plan around the new data. He saw the sheer tonnage of effort. He saw the discipline that had turned doubt into a checklist. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at his desk, at the printouts of my acceptances. When he looked back up, his eyes were different. The weary cynicism was still there, but it was clouded by something else, confusion, and a dawning, uncomfortable respect. I see," he said finally. The words were empty, devoid of their usual guiding authority. He had no more advice to give. His entire philosophy of prudent limitation had just been met with a detailed map of persistent, adaptive action. He was speechless. I stood up. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Croft." I left his office, closing the door softly behind me. The hallway was bright with April sun streaming through the windows. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. I had stated my facts. I had held my ground. The mission was still active. I saw Anya at her locker at the end of the day. She was waiting for me. This time, I didn't turn away. She looked at me, her face a complex map of triumph, guilt, and anxiety. "Elias, I heard." "Congratulations, Anya," I said, and I meant it. The bitterness from the mailbox had been burned away in Chen's armory, refined into a colder, harder fuel. "You earned it." She searched my face. "The waiting list." "Is a waiting list," I finished for her. "I have a plan." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the competitive respect that had always been between us surfacing. "You always do," she paused. "For what it's worth, I wish it had been both of us." "So do I said, and I did. The rivalry wasn't personal, it was arithmetic, one slot. I'll see you around." I walked out of the school into the spring afternoon. The air was warmer now, carrying the scent of damp earth and new growth. I drove home. Up in my room, I took the thin envelope from the drawer. I didn't look at the letter again. I opened my laptop. I logged into the portal for State University. I accepted their offer of admission. I paid the enrollment deposit. It felt like crossing a line, not a retreat. Then I opened a new document. I titled it Plan B, Readiness. I started a list. Maintain PT score of 280 or above. First semester course load. Calculus, chemistry, English, history. Investigate college-level reapplication process. Weekly check-ins with Sergeant Major Chen. Find a training partner. The devastation was still there, a hollow space under my ribs, but it was no longer a void. It was a secured perimeter. Inside it, a different kind of resolve was taking shape, quieter, harder, less about the glittering prize and more about the integrity of the effort itself. The preparation hadn't been for a yes. It had been for this, for the long, uncertain road, for the next obstacle. I began typing, the click of the keys a steady, familiar rhythm, building a new system from the ground up. The weight of the diploma in my hand felt foreign. Heavy. The cheap blue leatherette cover, the gold foil lettering that already seemed to be peeling at the edges, it was supposed to be a ticket. A key. For 4 years, it had been the gleaming finish line at the end of every all-nighter, every panic attack before a final, every soul-crushing shift at the grind. Now, as I stood with my family in our cramped living room, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and my mom's perfume, it just felt like paper. "My baby," Mom whispered, her eyes glistening. She'd taken a half day from the diner, her uniform swapped for a faded floral dress. She clutched the diploma like it was the holy grail, her fingers tracing the embossed letters of West Ridge High. A college man, I always knew. Dad clapped a meaty hand on my shoulder, his smile strained. "Proud of you, son, real proud." The unspoken words hung between us, louder than his voice. Proud, and now what? The factory layoff last winter had aged him a decade in 6 months. The hopeful glint he'd had when I started senior year was gone, replaced by a permanent, weary squint. My younger sister, Chloe, bounced on the balls of her feet. "Does this mean you're gonna be, like a doctor? Or a lawyer? Can I tell Kaylee my brother's gonna be a lawyer?" "It means he worked hard," Mom said firmly, shooting a look at Dad. "It means he's got options." Options? The word tasted like ash. My options, meticulously laid out in a spreadsheet on my laptop that I'd stared at until the blue light made my skull ache, were thus. Option A, community college. 2 more years of grinding for an associate's degree in something. Business? Maybe, while working full-time to help with the mortgage. A slow, debt-avoidant crawl towards a slightly better-paying version of the life I was already living. Option B, state school. A mountain of loans I couldn't fathom, for a bachelor's degree whose value everyone on the internet seemed to debate. 4 more years of academic pressure, emerging at 22 into the same choked job market, but with a monthly payment the size of a car loan. Option C, the trades. Dad's cousin knew a guy in the electricians' union. It was solid work. Honest. My hands were good with tools. I'd fixed the dryer last fall. It meant swallowing the dream, the one I'd never fully articulated even to myself, of something else. Something that involved words and ideas and air that didn't smell like deep fryer grease or factory solvent. None of them felt like options. They felt like prefabricated cages, each with a slightly different paint job. "We got you a little something," Dad said, his voice gruff. He handed me a thin, rectangular box. Inside, on a bed of tissue paper, lay a watch. It wasn't fancy, a sturdy Casio with a black resin band and a digital face. But it was new. The price tag, carefully snipped off, had left a tiny telltale gouge in the plastic. "Every working man needs a good watch," Dad said, avoiding my eyes. "Keeps you on time, on schedule." On schedule, the greatest fear of my parents' generation, instilled in me like a second religion, falling off the schedule. The school schedule, the work schedule, the life schedule. Graduate, get a job, get married, get a house, work until you die. The watch was a totem. A chain, a loving, beautiful, heartbreaking chain. I fastened it around my wrist. It fit perfectly. "Thanks, Dad, it's great." The celebration was a pot roast, Chloe's favorite. We ate at the folding table in the living room so we could watch TV. The local news ran a feel-good segment about another graduating class, the valedictorian talking about limitless futures. I pushed my potatoes around my plate. Later, in the cave of my room, I took the watch off and laid it on my desk next to the laptop. The spreadsheet glowed back at me. Projected monthly loan payment, $487, over 4 years, for a degree in marketing, because it had seemed practical. A word I was beginning to hate. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya, my maybe-something from AP English. We de-kissed once after prom in the back of her friend's Honda Civic. It had been nice. Wet, but nice. "Hey grad, party at Jake's Lake House TMRW night. You in?" I stared at the text. Jake's dad was a surgeon. The lake house was a real house on a real lake. Last summer, Jake's party had ended with a jet ski wrapped around a dock. The insurance deductible was probably more than my dad's severance pay. "Can't," I typed back, "got stuff." "Stuff? Come on, Elias. Last summer before the grind." The grind? She meant college. Her grind was a semester abroad in Barcelona, funded by her parents. My grind was literal. "Sorry," I sent, then after a moment, "have fun." I put the phone face down. The silence in the house was a physical thing. Down the hall, I could hear the low murmur of the TV, the clink of my parents washing dishes. A life in miniature. A life I loved them for, and a life I was terrified of inheriting. I opened my bottom desk drawer, pushing aside old textbooks and a broken headset. In the back was a small, lockable metal box I'd bought at a yard sale years ago. Inside, there was no weed, no secret love letters. There was a sheaf of papers, folded and refolded so many times the creases were soft as fabric. They were printouts. Blog posts, articles, fragments of stories I'd written between homework assignments and work shifts. A review of the Dune sequel I'd posted on a forum under a pseudonym. A rambling, 3,000-word analysis of the political symbolism in the Hunger Games trilogy I'd written for no one, at 2 a.m., driven by a caffeine buzz and a strange, urgent need. A short story about a guy who worked in a factory that made clouds, who smuggled out a piece of one in his lunchbox to give to his depressed wife. They were terrible, of course they were, but they were mine. The only things that felt entirely mine, not for a grade, not for a paycheck, just because. I traced a finger over a typed sentence. The sky above the factory was the color of television, tuned to a dead channel. I'd ripped off Gibson, obviously, but when I'd written it, it had felt like a revelation. Like I'd plugged into some hidden current in the world. This was the dream. The stupid, secret, impossible dream. To string words together for a living. To have thoughts and make them into things other people might read. To not sell the hours of my life in chunks for someone else's profit margin. It was the most ludicrous ambition in the history of my family. My grandfather had mined coal. My father made car parts. I would write about feelings. For who? Who would pay for that? The answer, of course, was almost no one. The internet was a graveyard of a million better writers than me, shouting into the void for free. I knew this. I'd researched it until I felt sick. The odds of making a living, a stable living, this way were worse than the odds of getting struck by lightning while winning the lottery. A responsible man would close the box, put it away, get a good night's sleep, and call the electricians' union in the morning. I closed the box, I didn't put it away. I lay in bed for hours, watching the headlights of passing cars paint moving rectangles across my ceiling. The Casio watch on my desk emitted a soft, green glow. Each tick was a second gone, a second closer to a decision. The responsible decision was a cage. The irresponsible dream was a cliff. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew it was 4:17 a.m. The house was silent. The kind of deep silence that feels like a held breath. And I knew. I knew with a cold, clear certainty that felt like jumping into a winter lake. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sign up for the cage, not yet. The sheer weight of the forever of it, community college to a desk job, or the union to a lifetime of conduit and wire nuts, pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. It wasn't bravery, it was the opposite. It was a failure of nerve. The courage to accept the cage was beyond me. I got out of bed. In the blue light of my laptop, I didn't open the spreadsheet. I opened a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keys. What was I doing? What was the plan? There was no plan. There was only a yawning, terrifying freedom, and a single directive thought: buy time. I began to type. To whom it may concern. I am writing to inquire about any entry-level positions that may be available within your organization. I wasn't picky. I went broad. Local newspapers, what few were left. Content mills, marketing agencies in the city that might need a blog monkey. Corporate offices for the chain that owned the grind. I sold my non-existent experience, my passionate communication skills, my meticulous attention to detail, honed by making cappuccinos for angry soccer moms. I crafted a dozen variations of the same desperate lie, wrapped in the polite, eager-to-learn language of the professional world. With each application, a little ball of shame solidified in my gut. This was the dream. begging for a chance to write SEO spam about erectile dysfunction or listicles about office plants. This was my rebellion. But it was a year. A year in an apartment with maybe one other guy, writing copy for paychecks. It was a year where the lone clock wasn't ticking. A year to what? To write in the evenings? To magically get good enough to make a real go of it? It was a fantasy, a holding pattern. I knew it even as I hit send on the last email as the first gray light of dawn touched my window. I was choosing the cliff. But it was a slow-motion cliff, and maybe, just maybe, I'd learn to fly on the way down. I crawled back into bed for an hour of fitful sleep. When I woke, the house was already moving. The smell of coffee and toast, the sounds of Chloe arguing with the TV. I dressed mechanically, jeans, a t-shirt, normal day. In the kitchen, Mom was loading the dishwasher. "You're up early," she said, her voice bright, too bright. "Big plans for today? Job hunting?" The hope in her eyes was a knife. "Yeah," I said, the lie smooth and automatic. "Gonna hit the library, spruce up the resume, check out a few things online." "That's my boy," Dad said from behind his newspaper. He lowered it. His eyes, bloodshot and tired, met mine. "You'll find something. Head up, elbows out. That's how it's done." Head up, elbows out, the family mantra, fight for your spot in line. "Thanks, Dad," I said, pouring a coffee I didn't want. I had to get out of the house. The walls were closing in, the weight of their hope and my deception a physical pressure. "I'm gonna take a walk," I said, "clear my head." "Good idea," Mom said. "It's a beautiful day." It was overcast, the sky a uniform sheet of gray wool. The air was warm and damp, promising rain. I walked with no destination. Past the shuttered video store. Past the park where the swings creaked in the breeze. I ended up outside the grind. My shift didn't start until noon, but I could see Amber through the window, restocking the pastry case. I almost went in. The familiar grind of it was a siren call. Clock in, make drinks, clock out, collect money. Simple, clean. But I kept walking. I walked until my feet hurt, until the suburbs gave way to the older, denser part of town near the river. Here were the converted warehouses, the tech startups with their ironic names and bike racks, the coffee shops that charged $7 for a pour-over. I stopped in front of one, the Steaming Bean. It was all exposed brick and reclaimed wood. Inside, through the window, I could see people my age or a little older typing on sleek laptops. They wore glasses and vintage t-shirts. They looked serious, intent, like they were building something. One guy, with a beard and a beanie despite the warmth, was gesturing animatedly at his screen, talking to a friend. So the narrative here isn't about the hero's journey, it's about the systemic decay, you know? The environment is the antagonist. I felt a surge of something so sharp it was almost nausea. Longing, and a bitter, immediate resentment. Who were these people? Where did they come from that they could sit in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning and debate narrative theory? What distant, privileged planet had they beamed down from? My hand went to my wrist. The Casio watch wasn't there. I'd left it on my desk. A drop of rain hit my forehead, then another. The sky opened, a sudden, soaking summer downpour. I didn't run for cover. I stood there on the sidewalk as the rain plastered my t-shirt to my skin, soaked my jeans. I let it wash over me. The guy in the coffee shop glanced out, saw me standing there like an idiot, and looked away, back to his screen. This was it. This was the gap. The chasm. On one side, the world of the Steaming Bean, of narrative theory and systemic decay, of parents who funded semesters in Barcelona. On my side, the grind, the factory, the pot roast, the watch that kept you on schedule. And I was in the middle, getting drenched, with a locked metal box under my bed and a dozen emails sent into the void begging for a footbridge. The rain slowed to a drizzle. I was shivering. A bus rumbled by, hissing through a puddle and soaking me again. I didn't care. I started walking back the way I'd come. The walk of shame. The walk of the defeated. The responsible thing to do now would be to go home, tell my parents the truth, that I was scared, that I needed a gap year, that I was going to work full-time at the grind and save up while I figured things out. They'd be disappointed, worried, but they'd understand, maybe. But I knew I wouldn't do that. The emails were sent, the lie was in motion, I had chosen the cliff. Now I had to live with the wind in my face. As I turned onto my street, the sun broke through the clouds, low and golden in the late afternoon. It steamed the water off the asphalt, making the world look fresh-washed and new. For a second, it almost felt like a sign. Then I saw the car in our driveway, not my dad's beat-up sedan, a newer model Toyota Corolla, silver, clean. My steps slowed. We didn't know anyone with a car like that. I walked up the driveway, my wet shoes squeaking. Through the screen door, I could see figures in the living room. My mom and dad on the couch, and across from them, in my dad's recliner, a woman. She was in her 40s maybe, sharp, professional. She wore a navy blazer and sat with perfect posture, a leather folio on her knees. She was talking, my parents listening with rapt, frozen attention. My dad saw me first. His face was a mask of confusion and something else, awe. "Elias," he said, his voice strange, "come in here." I pushed open the screen door. The hinge screamed. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. The woman stood up. She was tall. She had a kind smile, but her eyes were assessing, like she was measuring me for a suit. "Elias Vance," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, cool. "I'm Dr. Anya Sharma, from the Thorne Foundation." I shook her hand, my mind a perfect, blank static. Thorne Foundation? I'd applied for a few scholarships, but nothing with a name like that. It sounded like a supervillain's charity. Hi, I managed. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to the space beside my parents. I sat, perching on the edge of the cushion. My wet clothes felt suddenly obscene in our clean living room. Dr. Sharma sat back down, opening her folio. "I apologize for the unannounced visit. We tried to call, but the number we had on file seems to be disconnected." My mom flushed. The phone bill, we switched to a cheaper plan. Dr. Sharma nodded, as if this was a perfectly normal explanation. "Of course. Well, I'm here because of your application, Elias." "My application?" I said. The word hung in the air. I hadn't applied to any Thorne Foundation. Was this about the community college, the marketing degree? "Yes," she said, her eyes locking on mine. They were a dark, intelligent brown. "Your writing portfolio. Specifically, the piece you submitted last fall. The Cloud Factory." The air left the room. I couldn't breathe. The Cloud Factory. My stupid, secret short story, the one about the guy and the clouds. I'd submitted it. Then it hit me, last fall. Ms. Garrity, my AP Lit teacher, she'd been pushing me all semester to share my voice. She mentioned some contest, a long-shot thing for unusual perspectives. I'd brushed her off. But one night, frustrated, I'd slapped a PDF together, the story plus a few of the analysis essays, and emailed it to her just to get her to stop asking. "Here, this is what I do." Happy? I'd forgotten about it immediately. I did, I stammered. "It was submitted by your teacher, under your name, for the Thorne Foundation Young Voices Award," Dr. Sharma explained smoothly. It was a long shot, of course. We received thousands of submissions, but our readers were struck by it. She pulled a single sheet of paper from her folio. It was a printout of my story. I could see notes in the margin in neat, blue pen. Evocative metaphor for alienated labor, raw but compelling voice, striking image of stolen beauty. Someone had read my story. Someone professional had read it and written notes. "The award itself comes with a modest cash prize," Dr. Sharma continued. "But that's not why I'm here." She leaned forward slightly. "The foundation has a separate, highly selective initiative. It's not widely advertised. We call it the apprenticeship. It identifies young individuals with a distinct way of seeing the world, individuals who might not thrive in or have access to traditional pathways." My parents were statues. My mom's hand was clamped over her mouth. What does it involve?" my dad asked, his voice hushed. "A year," Dr. Sharma said, her gaze returning to me. "A year of immersive, funded experience. Placements are tailored to the individual's inclinations. For a writer with an eye for the systemic and the symbolic," she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "We have connections. In publishing, in journalism, in new media. The goal is not to teach you to write in a classroom. The goal is to put you in rooms. To have you learn by being around people who are doing the work at a high level." A year, funded, rooms. It was a fairy tale, a scam. It had to be. "Why?" I blurted out. The word was too loud in the quiet room. "Why me? Why this?" Dr. Sharma didn't seem offended. She smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. Because the world has plenty of people who can write a clean sentence, Elias, what it lacks are people who see a factory and think of clouds, who understand the weight of a cheap watch. Her eyes flicked to my wrist where the Casio wasn't. The Foundation believes that particular lens is worth cultivating, even if it's unpolished, especially because it's unpolished. She closed her folio. This isn't an offer, not yet. It's an invitation to an interview in the city next week. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and held it out. It was thick, creamy stock. Dr. Anya Sharma, Director of Special Initiatives, the Thorne Foundation. I took it, it felt real. The interview will be challenging, she said, standing up. My parents and I scrambled to our feet. We'll want to know not just what you write, but why you write, what you fear, what you want. The apprenticeship isn't a gift. It's an exchange, a year of your life for access and guidance. It requires total commitment and a certain tolerance for uncertainty. She looked at me, and in that look I felt she saw everything. The fear, the desperation, the metal box under the bed, the cliff I'd already jumped off. Do you think you might be interested, Elias? She asked. The word was in my throat ready. Yes, a scream of yes. But I looked at my parents. My mom's eyes were wide, swimming with tears of pride, of terror. My dad's face was unreadable, the gears turning behind his eyes. Funded. A year. Not college. Not the union. Something else. Something unknown. I saw the war in them. The lifetime of believing in schedules and safety, crashing against this impossible, glittering chance. I swallowed the yes. It wasn't just my choice. I need to think about it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. Sharma nodded, as if she'd expected nothing else. Of course, the card.